Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 21 of season 2 of Riverdale, Judgment Night. This being our penultimate episode, the show really does go all out. The craziness and oh man, am I so loving it. Let's kind of get right into it. So it turns out that Hal is indeed the Black Hood after all. This really, I mean, everything makes sense. They really did kind of throw me for a loop by having the Black Hood shoot somebody last episode, turn up last episode when we could clearly see Hal somewhere else. But there's just too much stuff that made sense for it to be him. Um, Kind of going back into him explaining his motivations, we see that Hal's been a messed up guy basically his entire life. I do like that Alice turns it around on him and basically points out how he's an enormous hypocrite. He slept with Penelope Blossom. He's going around judging all these people, calling them sinners and stuff, even though he's done all of this really horrible stuff himself. Um, I mean, look at what he did. I mean, he played this insane psychological game with his own daughter. But I do like how when Hal is talking, he kind of says, like, my father had this darkness in him. I had this darkness in me. And now this is the same darkness that's in Betty. And, Betty has, repeatedly said, I don't know why, but I have this darkness inside me. Kind of would have been nice if they'd made some sort of a remark about Polly in that context. But I think it's just kind of safe to say, from the circumstances, that Hal probably does not believe that, for whatever reason, that Polly inherited that darkness. It's skipped over her for whatever reason, but it did manifest within Betty. And going back for a moment to the whole hypocrisy thing, Hal's talking about all this stuff. All the people that he needed to punish, and yet Hal murders a man for no other reason than he was just asking a lot of uncomfortable questions. And, there's the whole thing with trying to bury Archie alive, among other things. So, yeah, Hal really is a pretty enormous hypocrite. And it's just pretty amazing, just like how really messed up the parents here in Riverdale are. I mean, Jason Blossom's father murdered him. Penelope tried to kill her mother-in-law, sent Cheryl off to a loony bin. Um, Alice is no saint herself. Midge's mom ended up being the one that ultimately shot and caused Fangs to die. Josie's mom is very judgmental and, more than a little controlling. Never mind the fact that she and Sheriff Keller were having an affair. I mean, really, like, Fred is one of the few really genuinely good parents here on the show. And of course, you've got Hiram and Hermione, who are basically gangsters. Hiram, man, oh my God! Like, if you really stop to think about it, Hiram, is just like a complete and utter monster. I mean, he put Reggie, who's a teenager, up to killing Fangs, who is also a teenager. When things went south and Reggie asked him for help, oh, surprise, surprise, Hiram just immediately throws him under the bus and is like, oh, sorry, Reggie, I can't help you. And of course, Hiram's got a perfectly good lie already prepared in case anybody asks, like, hey, why after all that happened did Reggie call you, of all people, Mr. Lodge? I mean, Hiram's got something up his sleeve to explain that away. I mean, he even sets up and, like, quickly arranges for Andre and Little Potato's deaths to be considered part of the riot. And then he cuts a deal with Jughead that basically would, to kind of like spare the serpents. And of course, he doesn't follow through with that at all, and this leads to Jughead being, well, okay, we know they're not going to kill Jughead. He's kind of the narrator of the series and one of the all-time classic Archie characters, so we know he's going to survive. But he basically was basically willing to stab Jughead in the back after making a deal with him, and led him into a situation where he knew that he was almost certainly going to be killed. And never mind all the manipulation of Archie that he has done, and his own daughter, and his wife. Of course, it's sort of implied that Hermione is sort of like his right-hand woman and has had her hands in the deaths and other violent actions of his criminal enterprise, which does take away from her sympathetic side. But anyway, just this episode, we've basically seen Hiram being totally willing to engineer the deaths of two teenagers and get one teenager to basically just stupidly throw his entire future away for no other reason than the benefit of Hiram Lodge. I mean, wow. And never mind the whole thing with the October surprise that he was planning, which would, of course, damage his own wife's reputation. Now, why in the world, I still don't get why he is so full that this would be so much worse for Fred than his wife. I mean, yes, Fred is kind of campaigning as a family values candidate, but any sort of candidate who wants to really get public office in the United States generally is going to have to present themselves as having fairly squeaky clean family values. Now, granted, it's always interesting when the people who trumpet this the loudest get caught being complete and utter hypocrites. But as I've said before, Hermione is married to a man who spent basically all of last year in prison. So yeah, I really think that, like, oh, but Fred was, getting involved with a woman who was still technically married. I mean, granted, it's the other person that's running for mayor. I was just like, really? You really think this is going to come out so much worse for Fred, who, spent his whole life in Riverdale? Like, I mean, Hermione left Riverdale when she was still a young woman and only came back last year. Fred's been there his whole life. He's run a successful local business. Yeah, he's divorced, but, those things, that happens. Okay, Archie's done some stuff that's not fantastic. But, Veronica is not without blame either. Now, granted, Hiram's probably arranged it so that none of Veronica's really egregious shenanigans back when she was still in New York and a much less moral and less nice person was doubtlessly covered up. But still, yeah, I really, really think Hiram's plan in this situation is complete and utter garbage. I mean, seriously, this is stupid, stupid thinking. And never mind that everything that's going on here is also going to just further alienate Archie from him. Archie is like the one person who lately has been really, really, utterly in Hiram's corner. But here, like, okay, Reggie's not Archie's best friend, but Archie does care about what happens to Reggie. He certainly doesn't want Reggie to go out there and murder a guy and destroy his life. I mean, this is a kind of a situation where, like, the word frenemies really does seem to apply to Archie and Reggie. Like, yeah, Reggie's a jerk, but he's my teammate on the football team, and at heart, he's not really a bad person. He's just kind of a dick, which is pretty in keeping with the general take on Reggie. Now, just how much of a jerk Reggie is has varied greatly over the years, but it's always been shown that underneath it all, Reggie does care about the rest of the Archie gang, and that he does have some kind of sense of morals. He's not the nicest guy in the world, but he's not an awful, utterly monstrous person either. He's, kind of a dick, but a dick that's not such a terrible guy under there. Not unlike Veronica, who's in the comics is generally portrayed as being a much more shallow and selfish person than here on the show. But underneath it all, you know that Veronica is a good person who genuinely cares about her friends, particularly Archie and Betty. Yeah, she may sometimes be a little selfish and unthinking, but she will always be there for her friends and is always very upset when things happen that upset her friends, which of course is very in keeping with the Veronica on this show. And I did really like the scene with Veronica and her mom this episode after Hermione kills Papa Poutine's son, the hilariously named Small Potatoes, um, where Veronica's just like, Dad, I am just so completely and utterly done with you. And you can kind of tell that Hermione is kind of realizing, like, man, I really have been kidding myself for years. Hiram doesn't really care about me. At the end of the day, I'm just another tool for him, no matter what he says. And again, keep in mind, and I think this is one of the. I'm a little disappointed they never brought it up again, but in a way, I'm also kind of proud about it. With that moment when Veronica realized that she has never heard her parents say that they love each other. So, yeah, what, with the whole situation with Hiram, I have a feeling that the end of the season, it's either going to end with him getting some really serious comeuppance for everything that he's done, or somehow he's really going to come out on top in a big way. I think it's going to be a real all or nothing for Hiram. I'm kind of leaning towards the former, which is the idea of like what happens if at the end of the day Hiram does win it all and like he is unquestionably the most powerful man in Riverdale. Well, obviously that can't stand. So Archie and the gang are going to have to do something about that. But, Jughead beaten pretty much beaten 90% of the way to death, and Veronica, uh, clearly willingly alienating herself from him. I mean, whew, that would be a really steep mountain for them to climb. But I kind of have the feeling that the show for season 3 would really need to do something else. Introduce a new big bad, for lack of a better term, because we've really gotten to know Hiram very well this season. And the idea of, like, last season he was off the board. Here he's very much a big player. And just having him amp up to be the big bad the next season, I mean, there are possibilities there, but I'm just not feeling it. I really do have the feeling that next week some chickens are going to come home to roost in a really serious way for him. And one of the reasons I think that is we see that there's another Black Hood running around town. Well, okay, who the heck is this? Well, let's see. What did this Black Hood do? Well, tried to kill Fred, and it would make sense that he would be the one who actually shot Fangs. Now, who would benefit from Fred being dead and from all the insanity that would caused by Fangs getting shot under those circumstances? Well, okay, if Fred gets killed during a riot, well, nobody's going to ask too many questions about that, now are they? Fangs dead? Well, heck, that's one less Southside Serpent, isn't it? And, him being viewed as a murderer? Well, if the ghoulies come along and wipe out the serpents, then again, who's going to question that too much? This serpent just murdered a girl at high school. What kind of stuff was his buddies getting up to? Oh, hey, that Jughead kid, he's dead. He was the son of the serpent leader. Who knows what kind of person he would have been if he'd survived to grow up? I just look at this situation, and it feels to me like the person that benefits most is Hiram. Now, again, I really don't like to do theory crafting in these videos, just because I hate being proven wrong. But I just look at this, and it's just sort of like, this is what my instincts as a storyteller, and like I have done writing in the past as a hobby. I've kind of gotten out of it the last few years, but I've been sort of in my free time trying to get back into it a little bit, and just my own personal study of the art of storytelling. And I don't claim to be any sort of expert or anything. I'm just somebody who's read a lot of books, watched a lot of movies, and done some reading on the methods and art of storytelling. And once you sort of understand, I guess, a little bit of the technical side of all of this, a lot of what happens in stories begins to make sense in different ways. And that's both good and bad. One thing that's kind of said about people who study filmmaking is that it really ruins your ability to enjoy movies, because basically you can just suddenly start picking apart everything, spotting all these flaws and all of these cliches and all this other stuff. And there is a similar situation here. But that's also kind of one of the things that makes watching stories fun, is because like is figuring out what's going on and using your knowledge of storytelling to kind of guess where things might be going, and in your own way come up with like, well, if I was doing this story, this is what I would do instead. Um, anyway, I'm getting kind of off topic here. Uh, of course, this is the next to last episode, and oh yeah, one thing. Why in the name of God did Jughead think that Hiram would keep his word? Really? Why? Hiram is a proven liar. Jughead knows Hiram hates him, and has to believe that Hiram has had his hands in extremely shady things, if not the deaths of people before in the past. So why in the world does he agree to this deal? I was so expecting like some sort of backup to pop up there and help, save Jughead again, like him getting Cheryl to back him up. Uh, that was really cool. That was really smart, and it was kind of gave Cheryl and Tony a nice moment. So yeah. Anyway, next episode. Oh my god, I can't wait for this. I am so pumped for this. I can't wait. I think. Oh yeah. Also, Penny Peabody is totally gonna get what's coming to her, and that's going to be very satisfying. I really like the actress who's playing her. She has done a great job of making me just like, oh Penny, I absolutely hate you. And of course, I get an immense kick out of the fact that she was live wire over on Supergirl. But anyway, it's going to be great. One thing that I've heard people, I believe it was like one of the people that make Arrow, they kind of said a really nice way of putting it is that like at the end of our seasons, we sort of just like to blow everything up. And that way, when we start our next season, everybody is in a different place. And this kind of helps keep the show from getting stagnant. And I think Riverdale is following that model very, very much. And honestly, I think it's a smart move. The core of the show, the Archie gang in high school, and there's all this crazy stuff happening in Riverdale, that's probably never going to change. Although, I guess after season 4, when they would reasonably be heading off to college, well, whatever, we'll worry about that in the future. But that's a formula you can't really beat. So, but I think a lot of the other things, like the alliances and relationships between characters and who's doing what with their life, that you can shift around the board quite a bit and still have it be good stuff. Anyway, guys, I've been at this for the better part of 20 minutes, so I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.